All right. Hi there, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're glad you're here. My name's Deb. I'm the founder of Find Calm here. We have conversations during these virtual events where we share resources to help you find calm in daily life. Different topics we talk about each week. Sometimes we're talking about nutrition, sometimes we're talking about wellness practices, mindfulness, meditation, incorporating intuition into your life, as well as setting intentions and creating affirmations. But today we are going to be talking about kids and how we can help them find a little bit of calm, and maybe the parents find a little bit of calm with mealtime and feeding kids. We have Find Calm here partner Amelia. She's going to be sharing her insights and what she works with her clients a lot about is this topic. So thanks, Amelia, for coming on. We're excited for this topic, so let's dive right in. I love it.
Great, thank you for having me. I'm just going to share my screen so you're not just looking at me this whole time. So yes, thank you so much for having me and for helping me come up with this topic about finding calm. That's not usually how I phrase things, and I love it. I wanted to just start by having everyone take a deep breath, since Deb's community is all about feeling more calm about foods and eating. I know most of us parents get really stressed at mealtime. And I wanted to start by having everyone just close their eyes and just take a deep breath and remind yourself that chances are you probably have enough food in your kitchen right now, or wherever you are. I'm sure you have enough food, chances are, to feed your family tonight, tomorrow, for a few days at least. And also, chances are, unless you have a child with a severe allergy or some type of disease, a metabolic disease, where they have to be really careful about what they eat, then they probably are able to safely eat most foods. And I think it's really important when we get stressed out about feeding that we just kind of stop and acknowledge how lucky most of us are that we have enough food, which is not everyone all the time, and that we most of the times our kids can actually eat whatever they want very safely and get very well nourished from a variety of foods, regardless of what messages we get out there about what we're eating. Most of our food is very nourishing. So it's important, I think, to just feel grateful and acknowledge that. And I wanted to give a little background about who I am. My name is Amelia Sherry. I know that people are here already know me, but I'm going to say it for the recording. I'm a nutritionist. I specialize in pediatrics. I work at Mount Sinai in pediatric endocrinology. And I also have a growing community that I started recently called the Feeding Well, which is geared towards women who are raising girls. And my approach, most people are surprised, I am a nutritionist, but we are not going to talk about food or nutrition specifically. So I talk a lot more with the families I work with. We talk a lot more about the hows of feeding, not the what. So I'm not going to, everyone can relax. I'm not going to say exactly what you need to eat. Most people are relieved to hear that when I tell them. We're going to talk more about how we're approaching feeding our kids. Deb's happy about that. Great. Let's see. So I was wondering if the chat box is up. I wondered what actually stresses everyone out about feeding their family. I know that we have a pandemic going on right now, and it's stirred up a lot of extra stress because most parents, and in particular women, are now feeding their kids not once a day or twice a day, but 3 times a day, 5 times a day. They're just spending so much time with your family. So that's a stressor that I hear a lot from parents right now. And then there's, of course, all the evergreen things like my child's not gaining enough weight, or they're gaining too much weight, or they are not eating enough kale, or they're eating too much sugar. So I'm just wondering what is stressing everyone out. And I can't see the chat. So Let's see. Can't remember how to do that.
It says mine,
Oh,
Tasman
I
says
got it.
mine
Too
was
much
too
sweet
picky.
stuff. And yeah, so I see it was too much sweet, which is very, very common. Of course, we're just coming off Halloween right now because it's the beginning of November. But most kids are after they crave sugar and they love it. And that's actually, so it's really common. Number one, it tastes good. And number two, their bodies are just primed to know that that is a way to get a lot of energy quickly. So that's really common. And a lot of parents, myself included, get stressed and getting too picky, being more limited. That's also really common. And then cooking. Yes, cooking is also stressful. It's a whole nother job in and of itself, and it's time consuming. And depending on how your kids react to your cooking, that adds another level. They might not like what you like to eat or to make. And so, yeah, that's definitely another common stressor. Let's see. Finding the balance between how to manage the kids' food environment and also letting them make their own choices. Okay, true. And I think you mean by food environment, probably not in your home. You mean like the wider environment. I'm assuming like everything they're getting exposed to. Okay, good. And letting them make their own choices. Oh no, in the home. Okay, in the home. Okay. Okay, we'll talk more about that towards the end. We can have questions or have more of a discussion, hopefully. And letting them make their own choices is definitely a stressor. Parents don't know when to draw the line, how much freedom to give them. So we're going to talk about that actually. And how old are your kids? I actually know the people in that are here roughly how old you are. So we actually are gonna. I know that we have sort of younger school age, but all school age kids, and then up to adolescents. So there's no like infants and toddlers, and there's no teenagers. So we'll stick within that group. Okay, 12, 8, and 10. Great. That's helpful. Thank you. So from the mealtime, I came up with this mealtime calm toolkit, and it really focuses on 3 different tools. I wanted everyone to leave with specific things that they can do to kind of have more calm at mealtime and less stress. And it includes the approach, so how you're approaching the meal itself, the kind of structure that you have. These are things, again, tools you can use, and I'm going to talk about them more specifically. You're going to understand them really well by the end, I hope. And trust. Those are the 3 tools that we're going to use to create more calm. Okay, and some of the problems that happen that tend to stress parents out are when they, what I like to call, change lanes. So they sort of cross over and take responsibility for what their children really need to be in charge of, or the children's cross lanes and tell their parents what they need to do. And I'll get more specific with that in the next slide. And then, or the structure is missing. That seems like a really simple thing, and it causes so much stress, and it can solve a lot of problems. And a lack of trust. So just believing that your child actually does have a natural ability, so long as they're healthy, to actually eat, be a balanced eater. And it's something that they have to learn in time. It's not something that they just know, particularly when the food environment's constantly changing. So the first tool in the toolkit is approach. And the approach that I always recommend parents use is evidence-based. There's lots of research behind it. It's been around for several decades, actually. And it's originally founded by a nutritionist who's also a social worker, a family therapist, actually. And it's called the Division of Responsibility. Has anyone heard of that before? Just curious, because I know most parents are very well read these days. So yes. Okay, so Mary says yes. Okay. I'm just going to go over it again. So the division of responsibility really, it's very helpful because in my mind, it breaks apart what the parent's responsible for and what the child's responsible for. And I always like to start this explanation by telling parents this is not going to make you more stressed. It's not meant to. It's supposed to take a burden off your shoulders and make things easier, meaning that there's one camp of what my kid's going to be in charge of, and there's one camp of what I'm going to be in charge of. And I don't need to worry about their stuff, and they do not need to cross over and tell me what to do. And if they do, then we're going to put them back in their place, and I'm going to stay out of their place. And so the responsibilities that the parent has is what is going to be served or made or offered. And we want to choose a balance of foods or whatever is available. If things are limited or you're in a specific situation and you don't have access to a lot of variety or you don't have the means, whatever it is, you're going to choose the best options from what you have. You're also responsible for when the meals are served. And you are going to be responsible for coming up with a structure or a timing that works well for your child, depending on their age. And you're going to decide where the meals are. So you're going to be responsible with that too. So we want to have our meal, it's recommended. We recommend that you sit at a table, you don't have technology on, that kids have manners. So that's everything the parent is going to oversee. The child's responsibility is whether they're going to eat or not. So it's up to them. If they say, I'm not going to eat, or I don't like what we're having, that's their decision. And then the other thing, which is the most important thing, is that they're going to decide how much food they're going to eat or how little food. So that's very important. And a lot of parents get really tripped up on that, from my experience in talking with them, especially if there's issues or concerns about how much weight they are putting on or how much weight they're not putting on. So does anyone know, I know Mary, you said you know about this, do you know the reason why things are like, why they're separated like this? Would you like to share, or do you want me to keep going? I put her on the spot. Okay. So the reason it's really important to keep these things separate is because the parents do not want to tell a child that they have had too much or they've had too little. We really want children and adults, if they've been disconnected from it, we really want children you have a natural ability to know when you're full or satisfied. Satisfied is always a better word than full, because full is almost like too much, but you have an ability to know when you've had enough, and you also have an ability to know when you're hungry. And it's something that comes from an internal place, a bodily or somatic space, not something that comes from outside information. So when we take information from outside, I hear more people coming in, and use that to decide that we need to eat less or need to eat more, that's when we get really unbalanced. We get negative feelings, we get conflicted, our weight usually gets out of balance. And I could talk about that a lot more if people are interested, but basically the parent needs to trust the child and encourage the child to listen to their own body and to take information from within, not from the environment, and including the parent or the grandparent or the other people around them. And the other side of that coin is that the child is not going to dictate what is going to be eaten or what time. So the child isn't going to tell the parent, oh, you know what, I don't like what you made, I want you to make this, or I want to eat this, because the child doesn't know exactly what are the best foods and the best balance of foods or what is available. That's the parent's responsibility. And it's really important to keep those things separate. And you'll see, when you see sort of stressful situations or stressful dynamics with kids, it's usually they're crossing over. The parents telling the kid they need to eat more because they haven't had enough, in their opinion, or the child telling the parent, I don't want to eat that, you need to make something else. So it's very important to keep those two things separate. And if anyone wants to talk more about that at the end, I'm happy to. Let's see. I lost my bottom. I have too many windows open here.
Mary was asking if it's a good time for a question on this.
There's a question?
Yeah, Mary said she has a question. Can she ask
Okay,
it?
great. Thank you for letting me know, because I had to close.
It's okay.
I don't know. Is now good for questions? Sure, go for it. This is something that actually a lot of parents struggle with this. Actually, before you ask the question, I just want to make sure I have control of the deck here. Okay, go ahead. Actually, Mary,
You can
you want
unmute
to
yourself.
take it or ask?
Okay, thanks. Thanks. This is very helpful, and it is definitely something I struggle with, especially as my kids are getting older. So when they were younger, it was I very much controlled this more than I'd say I'm doing now. So it was 2 snacks a day, 3 meals. It was at these times roughly. We'd all sit down. Now that especially the oldest one is 12. I find it difficult to balance, like, kitchen's closed, nobody's allowed in there. And then, sometimes we have snacks or something around where it's okay to have them sometimes, like at lunch or, for school. But if they're going to go in the kitchen and choose 12 of them, for like a lunchtime at home, how do you balance that, I guess, as they get older? Where you're not in as much control. She's also home a lot, sometimes by herself, so any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so when you say, so first of all, kudos to you for even knowing about this and for having structure and having like a system in place with the meals and the snacks. Like that's, you're way ahead of the game than a lot of people. When you, as children get older, they have a lot more autonomy, as you know, and this is a so 12 and going into, so she's almost becoming a teenager. There's like a transition now, and I'm not a developmental expert, except for that I know about it with relation to food and other issues with regard to taking care of yourself. Like, you're kind of going through that transition where you were in charge and now she is taking responsibility. It's actually a really tough time for parents and kids, because she's learning how to be old, but she's not old enough. And you'll see it, like you'll go forward and then she'll regress, or and it goes back and forth, and it does continue for a couple of years. So it sounds like what's going on is kind of normal. I would, we're going to talk more at the end. One of the 3 tools is trust, and that is something that I think you have to parents struggle with. Like, she has to kind of learn on her own in a lot of respects what her limits are, and it may be a lot of overeating or undereating or skipping a meal, but she's going to have to kind of learn it on her own. You've already set the stage. It sounds like doing a great job for, these years when she was younger, having that structure in place. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you. I guess just maybe in relation to the what, that is something that I felt I could handle better when they didn't have access to the kitchen. And I struggle with not wanting to, like, prevent them from getting into the kitchen, now that they're old enough. I mean, that doesn't feel right either. But, the what, right? I understand I am in control of what I bring into the house. So if I bring in goldfish, let's say, or I don't know, something even, a bag of chips that they can maybe bring to school with them or something. Like, how I struggle with having that around and wanting to limit the what they are having when they leave the house, but when they're in the house, being able to limit that without, like, standing there and telling them, no, you can only have one, or, not in the kitchen now. Like, Does that make sense?
What is the reason that, and we could talk about more specifically at the end, but sometimes, like, what is the reason that you don't want her to have it? Like, if you don't mind sharing, like, what if you don't want her to have it because you say, you bought these and we have a limited amount and that's what we're, is going in your, your siblings' lunch, then no, you can't have it. Like, you just can't have it. It's for something else. You can't eat it right now. If it's that you bought it for her to snack on and now's, not the snack time, like so it kind of depends. Like when you say, with the what, is it that you would prefer that there's chips there, but you prefer she would snack on something else?
Yes, that. And yeah, also that, I mean, it's all three of them really. They, not just her, but they don't understand if chips are around, it's like one for lunch, So it's just hard when you're not standing there saying, okay, now is the time to have snack. Now is the time to have lunch. Like it's much more fluid now that they're older, they come and go in the kitchen, out of the kitchen, like in the house, out of the house. So it's, I'm just finding it difficult to manage that, like what, when.
Okay.
So anyway, I don't want to bog you down, just maybe.
We could talk about it more. There are sometimes it's a little more specific too. Like, maybe it needs to be more boundaries. What is the reason that she shouldn't be eating it or they shouldn't be eating it? So we could talk about it more specifically, maybe at the end. I do think it's a common problem.
Thanks.
I lost my train of thought for a second there. Sorry. Okay. Never used a slide deck on here. Okay.
You're doing fantastic.
Thanks, Deb. I never used a slide deck from Canva before. I've only used this PowerPoints. Okay, so these are the benefits for anyone who is just coming in. We're talking about the division of responsibility, which is an evidence-based feeding theory. There, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of research behind it, and these are some of the reasons, these are some of the outcomes that we see when parents use this sort of approach to feeding. They found that children have better, more eating competence, which is another research term, but basically they have more self-efficacy, or they feel better about their eating skills. They are usually more well able to regulate their intake, meaning they eat just the right amount. They don't do binging or eat way too much till they're uncomfortable, or they don't undereat and then complain they're hungry later. They usually have higher intake of fruits and vegetables and other high nutrient foods. And there's usually less stress for the parents and on the kids' parts. The kids arrive to the table with a lot less anxiety, because of sort of, it's actually a parenting style or a feeding style that the parent is projecting, and so there's just like less anxiety around it in general. It's actually a mix of structure and freedom, which we're going to talk a little bit more about with the other two tools that I recommend. So there's a question, just who's suddenly homeschooling? And I use the word suddenly, meaning you do not choose to homeschool. This is, like a new situation. I know that I've had a lot of that where all of a sudden my kids are home when they weren't. I'm going to assume that other people are in that position. And write in the chat if you want. So the reason I bring that up is because the second tool that I recommend is structure, having a really solid structure. So another thing that I find when I'm working with parents and they're feeling stressed out and things are going awry is that this structure has fallen apart. And I know that when even myself, even though I know how important structure is, when I moved to having the kids home in the spring, that kind of fell apart. I forgot that, I had breakfast and dinner down pat, but I forgot in the day we had that, my younger one has 2 snacks and the older one has 1. So structure is really important and I highly recommend it. It's also researched. It is a way to help decrease pickiness and selective eating. And a lot of people ask me how that works. When we have structure and we separate meals and snacks by certain time intervals, we allow appetite to build up. So that is another reason I don't recommend. I do recommend snacks for younger kids, but I don't recommend grazing or just having access to the refrigerator, the cabinets all day. It's not a great habit, and we find that when kids are grazing a lot, they're a lot less likely to eat what is presented to them at mealtime because their hunger is just not there. And also, it's just not a realistic way to live. I know that a lot of us are home now, so we have a lot of access to the refrigerator, but when you're in school and you're busy or you're at work as they get older, you can't just eat at any moment unless you're packing it with you, but you can't just stop, what you're doing just to have snacks. So we really do want to have set times for eating. It also helps kids regulate their intake, meaning that if they anticipate and are used to, okay, we always have breakfast, then we have snack, then we have lunch, they're much less likely to overeat when they do sit down because they know, okay, maybe I don't like this. I'm going to get to eat again in another 2 hours. We find when kids skip a lot of meals or parents are a little like less involved or not paying attention, that those kids tend to really overeat when they finally sit down because they've gone many hours and they're just not sure. It's almost like an anxiety builds. They're not sure when the next meal is going to happen because there's a lot of chaos usually around there. I don't want to use the word neglect, but that's what it's just. The eating routine has been sort of forgotten. So kids will overeat when they do get an option or an opportunity to do that. And again, it's just it's less stress. This isn't meant to help make things less stressful as a parent, not because we're giving you lots of things to do, but if you have a routine every day and that's the routine, then that's it. There's no questions about it. There's not always constantly, if your child's coming to you and asking for food or snacks in between meals, we already know that the answer is no. We're going to eat in an hour. We're going to eat in 2 hours, or we just ate. And I always recommend even posting it, especially if you have younger kids. Anything below 16, having it posted in the kitchen is helpful, just to keep kids aware and to remind yourself as well. And if you have a spouse who's on a different page with it, we can remember we agreed this is what the times are. So you can be very literal about it if you need to. Then the third tool that I recommend is tuning into trust. So I wanted to ask if anyone here has ever dieted, and I will say that I certainly have, and I know most people in this country have. And you can answer in the chat, or you could just answer to yourself if you're not comfortable. The reason that I bring this up is because dieting and eating, and not even dieting for weight loss, but following a diet is the exact opposite of teaching yourself to trust your body and listen to your body. I was talking earlier about taking information from the outside world and using that to help you decide how much to eat or how little to eat. And it's much more important to take it from inside. So often if we have a history of dieting, when there's a lack of trust, and when we see our children eat, it's very difficult to trust them that they are going to be able to do it right. And I have a bicycle here because I've written about this a lot, and I find the idea of teaching your child to ride a bicycle to be a really good analogy. When as a parent, you're providing that structure, and we talked about it with the division of responsibility and just even literally having a structured time for eating. But when you're teaching your child to ride a bike, for any parent who's ever done that, you know that you are providing a lot of structure. You're holding the bike a lot in the beginning. And that's you setting the schedule for eating, deciding the foods. But at some point, you are holding on less and less, and then at some point, usually you're just holding on to the back of the seat. For anyone who's ever done that, they'll know what I'm talking about. And at some point, you need to let go, and chances are your child is going to fall. They're going to lean way right, way left, and they're probably going to crash. And it's terrible to see. And I know for me, because I have a lot of issues with trust, it took forever for my older daughter to learn how to ride a bike. And it's because I did not want to let go of the seat. Every time she almost fell, I was grabbing it. So when that happens, if you know how to ride a bike, you know that you really need to feel it yourself, and you need to mess it up yourself before you can actually get balance. So it's like that with eating. So if you're watching your child struggle with eating too many sweets, or overeating, and things that you think, oh gosh, if they keep eating that, they're not going to feel so great later. It is really hard to watch, but if you keep dictating to them what they need to eat, or how much or how little, they are never going to learn it themselves. Just like if you keep holding and correcting them with that bike seat, they're never going to learn the balance. So trust is really important. It does tend to get a little mucked up if we have a lot of dieting voices and rules in our head, and it can be hard to trust our child. And that goes for lots of things that I'm not an expert in, but it applies to food in a very significant way. And it's really important to think of when things start getting, if you're feeling stressed out at a mealtime, you can think about these three things that I mentioned. And sometimes is it that I'm not trusting my child? Am I not giving them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to figure it out? Maybe not at this meal, maybe not this week or this month, but am I letting them have that freedom in there to figure it out? And that goes back to the division responsibility, where you're creating a structure of these are the times we're going to have meals, and these are the foods that we have in our home. And within that structure, you're letting your child within that structure figure it out and play with it, and mess up sometimes, and really learn their own rhythm in their body. And that's something they can take with them as they get older and are in high school and not around you and have more autonomy. If you keep applying the rules and being really rigid with it, when they leave, when they're on their own, they're not going to have that ability at all. So you really want them to, you can think of it as giving them something they can take with them. So I have a download on my website that kind of outlines some of these things that we talked about. It does have a kitchen. The kitchen is open, the kitchen is closed sign in there. I know Mary mentioned that that's recommended by a lot of, I guess, pediatric nutritionists or people who talk about the division responsibility, because we really do recommend having those boundaries around food, which I do know is harder as kids get older. Mary's asking through what age. I mean, I would use it with my own husband. I don't know, like we don't go in and out. I think you can use it up to any age. I mean, you're the parent, it's your kitchen, you paid for the food. It doesn't have to be, I think where we get, I might be reading into it. I know where I get messed up is that I think like, oh, you're having too much, and I feel like I don't want to make my daughter feel uncomfortable. Like why can't she eat it? But it's not about anything except for that we have a limited amount of food. We're not in my kitchen all the time making a mess, taking things I have here, and it's not eating time. I think that if anyone's living in your home, you have the right to impose those rules or boundaries around it. What do you think about that? What do people think about that? Too harsh? Deb says she's thinking of sensor cells. Yeah. Yep. That's great. Deb wrote that she's thinking of having signs, or maybe she has signs asking, am I hungry right now? That is great. That's for people who really struggle, who want to be more mindful and are working to really question why they're eating. which is another thing that I wonder about. When parents tell me kids are grazing all day, we have to ask why. Is it true hunger? Is it boredom? As we know, many of us eat for reasons that have nothing to do with hunger, and that is an issue because it means we're not dealing with what's underneath. So if a child or a teenager is looking for food in between meals, like we have to wonder, like why? And if it truly is hunger, then we have to, what I usually recommend is like we dial it back. Okay, you're always hungry around 2 o'clock. What are you eating at lunch? Is it actually food, nutrients that are filling? And I know I promised we wouldn't talk about specific foods, but we don't want to be hungry or looking for food in between meals all the time. We want to make sure that we've had something that's satisfying, the meal prior. And yeah, asking yourself if you're hungry before you eat, if you're eating out of turn or when, you might not be hungry, it's really important to question why you're eating. And to go back to Mary's earlier question, if it's snack time and you offer chips or whatever it is as part of snacks, that's food in your home and it's snack time, and then have at it, then she can definitely have that. And again, it'll be up to her to decide how many chips she needs, and if she overeats, then at that point it's really up to her, it's her body. And if she's eating past fullness, then that hopefully is something that she starts to acknowledge is not comfortable for her. Let's see. That's the end of what I had prepared to talk about. Are there things that fill me up versus leave me unsatisfied? And I think it's great as adults to have the mindful component to teach the kiddos. Yes. Let me take this down so you can see. Here's everyone. So let me read that again. Are there things? Yes, there's definitely different foods that are more filling than others, different nutrients. And it's good to know that when you're feeding your kids and when you're feeding yourself. Deb, do you know what some of those are?
I mean, I know certainly that chips are not filling. I could eat like the entire bag versus for myself. And I think I feel like that's probably applying to kids too, right? Like those kinds of foods are not going to be something, they're going to be hungry an hour later or something.
Yeah, certainly. So this happens a lot when parents tell me their kids are hungry and they're always asking. We want to dial back again. Is it actual hunger? Or is it boredom or emotion? And that's teaching them to be mindful is very important. In terms of fullness, the things that take the longest to digest, which are protein, fats, and fiber, those are the most filling or most satiating foods. Fat is the most satiating. Fat's tricky because we have some fats that are very, very inflammatory and some that aren't. So we want to be careful about that. And the simple way that I tell parents is if it's a plant fat, it's great, thumbs up. And if it's an animal fat, you might want to limit it a little more, especially if you have any cardiovascular issues in your family. So for instance, fat from avocados, nuts, seeds, those are great fats. Fats from fish, which is not a plant, I know, but so those fats are great. Fats from, butter, and animal meats, those we want to limit a little more. In kids, it's not as big of a deal unless there is some lipid issues there. And fiber is something I always go for with kids because so many kids suffer with constipation and diarrhea, and not getting enough fiber in the diet kids, it's a shortfall in this country in particular. So looking for foods that have fiber, snacks that have fiber, those are more filling. And protein. So always having a little protein is good with each meal and snacks. So yeah, chips are low in all three of those unless they're fried. They might have some saturated fat. But chips are something that you can eat volumes of and not get full. You may get full in the moment, but over time you your fullness won't last very long. And chips are also will raise your blood sugar and shoot out insulin, which actually stimulates your appetite. So that's why when we eat chips are delicious. But I do recommend putting, especially for kids who might, so that's the thing, is that they don't really have control. They're not buying the food. So if we're offering them chips as a snack, that's where we're going wrong. Like, a few chips, great, but can we add some other stuff to it for the offering, like some kind of protein, something else, or something with more fiber, so that they actually get full when they eat.
That's a good recommendation. Thank you for sharing that. I was wondering if like kids are the same as adults, with like you should be pairing like a protein with a like you were talking about with pairing foods together. So it sounds like kids.
Yeah,
it's for kids.
absolutely. Their biology works the same. They have bigger energy needs, and there's there are a lot of nuances there, but yes, it works the same. And when you see, so that also goes back to like when our kids start dictating to us what they want, if they want like kid food, like whatever these like kid snacks are, that is okay. You want kids also in certain age groups are very peer oriented and they want to eat what their friends are eating. So you want to offer some of those things and neutralize it, but normalize it a little bit, because otherwise what you can't have, you get very focused on. But you also want to pair it up with those things that are more filling. And that's why when the child goes back to vision responsibility, if the child's telling you, no, I only want this, I only want that, and you're catering to them and letting them sort of step into your side of the deal, then things get off balance, because now they're just eating stuff that you didn't choose, they chose, and they're probably also not getting the nutrients they need to grow, the micronutrients. Yeah, and as far as mindfulness with kids, it's for younger kids. There's something called the drum roll technique that I can give a handout on, to teach kids to kind of, you bang on the table a little, you tap, and it teaches kids to get back in touch with their body actually at mealtime. If they're asking for foods outside mealtime and you've already determined that they've had something satisfying, earlier on the regular, back to that structure, they're eating a good balanced breakfast, for instance, and they're still always asking for food in between meals, then we can start to guess it's more behavioral. There are behavioral issues. They're asking for food that has nothing. It could be emotional. It could be a couple different things, but you want to investigate it. And if it's something, I'm a nutritionist, if it's something more behavioral or an emotional thing, then maybe they need to talk to a therapist. We'll work with the family on that. But yeah. What other questions do people have? I know there was a question about pickiness. So that could be due to different things. It could be age related, so it does get heightened in younger children. And then it could also be related to how much a parent is sort of catering to a child. It could also just be that, like, so if a child starts to resist and the parent gets concerned, they might be more permissive with like, okay, you know what, you don't like what I'm offering, you didn't eat breakfast, like, okay, I'll give you this. And that can, it's called catering, and that can kind of grow into a larger issue. It can also be, kids also are different, have different food personalities, just like adults. Like, I don't like every single food. As adults, you have friends that will eat anything, and you also have friends that are a lot more limited. And that's just, it is natural. So we can't have like as high expectations for everyone's going to eat, the most adventurous eater. I know with kids I work with that are more limited, usually when they're anxious, it's a way to kind of control things. This is what I'm familiar with. This is what I want. Their world of food can start to kind of close in a bit with heightened anxiety. And I don't know, it's different in every case. Is the child always been a picky eater, or is it that they had a broad range of food and then it started to like get smaller? I forget who asked that.
Mary was asking, is there a developmental age? or pickiness gets less?
Yeah, usually around 4, it starts to decrease. But then when kids then they, go into kindergarten, you might have a great year, and then they start to become more peer oriented as they start to get 6, 7, 8, 9, and then they start to look at what other kids have. And some kids are very responsive, and it will be a big deal to them, and other kids are like, oh, I don't care what you have, so it depends again on personality.
Nice. I can't believe it. It's like almost that time that we're almost done.
No, I talked for 50 minutes.
You did amazing. It was great. I think it was super informal. My mother is on this call, so I don't know if she's gonna post anything in the chat, but my mom.
She had some tips for us, maybe.
I don't know. I don't know what she's doing because she doesn't have her camera on today. So, but thank you so much for sharing all these resources. It was really great. I think that lots of people could benefit from this information as far as, especially getting more mindfulness implemented younger. I think that's an amazing ability to be more in tune with what you can do better and how you can be more present in each moment.
Yeah, I think thinking a lot too, just personally, like where my reactions are coming from, like the pressure, I have pressure that my kid isn't, like there's a lot of food judgment, that our family isn't eating what those kids are eating, it's so much better. And so like there's that pressure I put on, or just, internal, I have my own issues that I've had with food. And so am I projecting them on? That's like why I think trust is a big, issue too. And like, I know a lot of parents I work with they don't, especially if a doctor has referred them because of something with their weight, now they're getting referred to nutrition. It's like, okay, we're doing everything wrong. Like, they actually they take more power from the child instead of like empowering them to figure out what's going on, why they're overeating. Sometimes it's environmental. The food that they have is high calorie and low nutrient. And sometimes it's not. So it's always complicated. It's always interesting to talk to families and sort of try to suss out what's going on with them. Thank you for having me. It was great.
It sounds like you've had a lot of really helpful tips for everybody in the chat and watching the replay. I'm sure there'll be a lot of things that people get to experience. There will be a recording, so anybody who's on our call, there will be a recording that you can rewatch this. And I think Amelia, you said you had something that you were gonna give or links, or were we gonna send them a link in the chat here?
Sure. I can put that in, and then in the community, in the FindCom community, I will list other
my mom was just saying about my nephew. That we use books and toys to distract during meals. How can we change that?
I'm sorry, say that again, Mom. What's up?
Her comment was that we're working with my grandchild who is 2 years old. We use books and toys to distract during meals. How can we change that?
Use it to distract from what?
I don't know, Mom, you want to come on? At least like unmute yourself? I don't know. Or type in the chat.
I'm here.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. Good to see you. Thank you for your help. They've gotten he doesn't want to eat. He gets impatient with eating. So they were using TV to distract him and feeding him early on. And then they got away from the TV and we're using, Mom was reading books to him during mealtime, or using toys. I've given him toys to play with during mealtime, or reading to him during mealtime. And I know my daughter's going to be watching this, so I'm sure she's going to be interested in your answers.
Okay, yes, my first thought was I don't want to gang up on mom without her here, because if she doesn't think there's an issue, then there's not an issue.
I'm asking this on her, for her benefit,
Okay,
because it's
okay.
something I know she'd want to have discussed.
Okay. Well, my first question would be, is there a issue with weight gain, like not gaining weight, like falling off the curve or growing, coming
His
up?
weight is good.
Okay.
His weight and his height are good.
Okay. And so what's the concern? Why the need to feed at 2 years old? That's at a point where, a
But
child.
he is feeding himself.
Okay.
Sometimes he just doesn't seem to have the patience to want to eat.
Okay.
And
So he definitely, if he's hungry, he will eat. If he's a healthy child, his appetite's intact. When he's hungry, he'll eat. I never recommend that families use distractions and then like spoon feed at that age, or even use distractions to kind of encourage the child to eat. And the reason is, with any issue, you always want to think too about the child over the long term, and like what are we teaching him? We want to teach him what we call eating competence, where he's able to feed himself, to choose foods that feel filling and that he enjoys. So if we are distracting him during the meal, we're teaching him that this is an unpleasant thing and that we have to almost force him to do it, or it's not sort of the vibe we want to give him for eating, right? If what I recommend, I would also wonder if he's actually, I'm wondering if he's actually hungry. If he's not, then we don't want to force him to eat or distract him to get him to eat. I know no one's forcing him. And I'm wondering if there's enough space between meals, or so what I tend to notice is that parents will become anxious if a child doesn't eat, and so then they'll keep offering food. Well, they didn't eat breakfast, so we're going to offer again in an hour. And they didn't really eat the snacks, so I'm wondering if enough time is spaced out in between the meals and snacks for appetite to actually build up. I'm wondering if it's good to have a mix of something he really enjoys with some new foods each time. That's how you also build up your sort of repertoire of foods, or something you're comfortable with, so you're not overwhelmed by something, a plate of scary food and unfamiliar food, which is hard even for an adult to sit down to like totally unfamiliar food. If you're in another country, you've experienced that. So it should be something they enjoy with a little something new. So I'm wondering what's on the plate, I guess. What else? What do you think is mom's question? Like, just if it's okay to distract during meals?
I think you pretty much covered some of the maybe other questions she might have. I'm not her, so I don't know what questions she has. But I know this has been something they've been a little bit concerned, just thinking maybe it was a stage that he, just till he gets older, that he would grow out of that.
Of not being interested in eating?
Yes.
Yeah. So if he's a healthy and normally developmental child, I didn't say that right, he will eat. Like his hunger is there, and when he's hungry, he'll eat. So offering the food regularly, having him sit at a table without distractions, and being, the hard part is to be okay. Going back to I don't know if you were here, we were talking about the division of responsibility, but you have to be okay if your child decides not to eat. That has to be okay, and it's okay if he leaves the table without having eaten. You reassure yourself as a parent, well, he didn't eat at noon. He's 2 years old. We have a snack in 3 hours or 2 hours, 2.5, whatever works for you. And he can have an opportunity to eat then. So he's not going to go hungry. And if he doesn't eat then, we're going to offer, we have dinner again at 5:00. So we can know that he's going to get offered food at that point as well. So you kind of reassure yourself that it's okay to skip. And, in time, I mean, as if he will definitely eat, like I said, if he doesn't eat, I've never heard actually of a child not eating for the whole day. So I would recommend trying that.
Okay, thank you.
And
I think the issue was that they felt he was not eating enough, and then he'd
so
be off to his playing.
so that is where we go back to, if he has not fallen off of his growth curve, then there's no issue. He's eating as much as he needs to eat to grow on his curve where he is and what's normal for him. So if he starts to fall off his curve, that's a different issue, and the pediatrician will bring that to their attention. But that is something I also, usually I'm working with parents. We're in an office and I have their medical chart up, and we can look at the growth chart, and it's very satisfying to say, look, your child actually is growing. So whatever he's doing is okay. Let's try not to make him eat or distract him. Let's try that for a couple of weeks and see. We can weigh him now and we can weigh him then, and we could see, is he actually losing weight when he eats what he's interested in eating, or is he not? Is he maintaining his weight? It's very, very normal, especially to be very concerned if you feel like your child's not eating enough. Like it's and to want to do whatever you would want to make sure that they eat more, right? But
as I'm thinking, I'm sorry,
no.
As I'm thinking more about it, I think Melody's, my daughter's work schedule has just changed. And so I don't have them at lunch so much. So they may be also working on that, just when he's done eating, he's done. I don't know how they're handling the meals anymore. They may be doing that already. So.
It's hard with lots of schedules and changing meals and everything. It does get tricky, but it sounds like he's doing really well on his own. So
good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the question. And that'll wrap us up for the evening. I wanted to say thank you for sharing your awesome wisdom, Amelia. Mary, welcome to Find Calm Here. Thanks for joining us today. Next week, we have a completely different topic, which is hiking, finding calm with hiking. And my mentor and really great friend, who's a photojournalist, is going to be talking about his experiences hiking in Colorado in the mountains, the peaks of Colorado at, how many thousands of feet. So excited for that. We do have a website, Find Calm Here. There's lots of different topics. So we have a YouTube channel, so you can watch the previous events that we've had that'll be on YouTube. This will also go on our YouTube channel. And we just launched a podcast where I have interviews with the Find Calm Here partners to promote this event and in previewing this event. So those are you can subscribe on those different places. Thanks so much, Amelia. Thanks again for being here.
My pleasure. And anyone who's listening, who's interested in the feeding well, if you are a woman, you're raising a girl and you're struggling with knowing the right things to say to her about foods, you can check out the feeding well, and you can always email me. I'm happy to answer questions. Also through the Find Calm Here community, which is amazing. And I'm looking forward to your upcoming topics.
Yeah, very cool. We've got some really good ones coming up. And the end of the month, right before Thanksgiving, we have one, Finding Calm with the Sunrise. We're going to be talking about morning routines. And then in December, we're going to be talking about how to find calm with the heart and get more connected and living a heart-centered life. So lots of really positive events coming up. Thanks again. I just put your website back in there, but all the links will be in the show notes too. So if you get the replay, I'll send the replay out in an email for whoever registered to this event, and then you can get the links there as well. So
great.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.